My name is Lou Hamburger, and I've prepared a presentation that I'd like to share with you. All right, first I will introduce myself very briefly. I'm from Holland. I studied business administration at a small university in the Netherlands. And from 1997, I've been traveling all around the world to carry out IT projects as a project manager and IT specialist. And I lived in the United States for that reason, and I did projects in Japan, Singapore, and also in Saudi Arabia, and many countries in Europe. Since 2010, I'm in Switzerland. In 2014, I work as a business developer for SAP Switzerland. The principles and the tools all have the same sources. I will show you that. I started with writing a screenplay with these principles. I wrote a book for writing about the need for new principles, and I produced a documentary pamphlet about one of the chapters of that book. And then in 2009, I started my first course on transparism, and I will explain in my the coming slides what I mean with transparism. In 2016, I followed a course organized by Conscious Business Enterprise, and this did similar things as I was doing. I was concentrating more on community and personal principles, and they were concentrating more on business principles. So I combined that, and I decided to devote a large part of my free time to communicating about the need for these principles and benefits of these principles to those who are interested to listen. Therefore, I set up my own company. This year, I published my first book, and the first book describes personal principles for a new community. And of course, the second book is business principles, and the third book is community principles, and they will be published later this year and beginning of next year. So, what are we going to do today? First, answer the question, the important question, why? Why is it necessary to look at new principles and tools? If I get you convinced, then the question is, how do we implement these new principles? And why do we transgress capitalism and replace it with something else? And then I will dive a little bit into the principles, and I will discuss the tools that are required. And then there's still time for some discussion. So why? Well, in my opinion, we need social stability on this planet. And social stability is per definition the day that all wars on this planet have stopped. In my opinion, we have technical development of about a 13-year-old and the social development of about a 3-year-old. Why is it only a 3-year-old? Because a child of 3.5, 4 years old learns that it is more interesting for himself and for the others to play together, whereas a child of 2 years old is still only playing with himself. Social development of 3 and a technical development of 13, it's a very dangerous situation on this planet. In fact, what could happen is that, according to some authors, happened on this planet before, during the Lemurian age and the Atlantic age. And these societies came to an end, and only very few people survived, and it took a very long time before a new society grew up. Now we are much further, we are much more developed. Homo sapiens is doing very well, and we have a very fair chance to grow towards social stability. But in order to get there, we need to make a change. And that's what this presentation is about. PS, social stability is not the end. When we are 18 years old as humanity, we can still grow, and that's called the super civilization, the age of Homo luminous. As I already mentioned with the title From Capitalism to Transparism of my book, I believe we are now in the capitalism phase, and we need to outgrow capitalism. Well, here, capitalism is compared with a caterpillar. A caterpillar eats and eats more than he needs, but the caterpillar already has DNA of the future butterfly. We are now in phase 2 of cocoon. The caterpillar has already turned in a cocoon. Capitalism is in decay. Nobody will deny that. And the DNA of the butterfly is now emerging. And these are the conscious leaders and the conscious businesses that are now growing. And they're doing very well. They have a lot of chance. They are not looked upon negative anymore. This presentation is about step 3. In step 3, all these initiatives are connected, because a butterfly can only fly when the legs and the arms and the eyes and everything is connected and turned into one big healthy butterfly. So now we need to see what the other conscious initiatives are, what the other conscious leaders are doing, conscious businesses are doing, and we need to start cooperating. That is what this presentation is about. And when that all works well, then at some point the butterfly can fly away. So, what I try to do with this presentation is to create some kind of coordination between all these conscious initiatives that are already taking place. There are thousands of conscious leaders heading in the right direction, and there are already thousands of businesses taking the right steps. I don't want to change anything in that. I just want to add something that it, and that is to allow all these initiatives to cooperate, to connect where useful. Now, how do we do that? How can we create this larger community of conscious initiatives? First, have a look at capitalism. As you know, capitalism leads to more money at the top and more unrest at the bottom. In most recent years, this is taking extremes. As you know, the 83 wealthiest people on the planet own more than 50% of the poorest people on the planet. So I don't need to say anything else about that. What is more important is to understand what the situation is with regard to the power of businesses in comparison to the power of consumers, people, and governments. I believe that businesses have overtaken power from government. Major laws are not written by government employees, but by lobbyists. And the same lobbyists have much more influence than consumer organizations. Many people are not members of consumer organizations, and those consumer organizations that exist have a hard time influencing government for legislation and controlling businesses. They have much more influence than consumer organizations, let alone than individual consumers. So capitalism has overtaken democracy. A good example, if making war is profitable to business, then war is made. And that's a painful understanding, but it's definitely true. If you look at documentaries about this topic, and I've listed many of these documentaries on my YouTube site. So capitalism has overtaken democracy. That means that with voting, we cannot achieve what we should achieve as people. And it's very difficult to change our leaders. The United States is having a major influence in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, and all these other befriended countries. And now they want to overtake influence that is now influenced by Russia, Syria, and Iran, and Georgia. So there's a huge fight over there. China has a lot of influence in Korea, in Asia, and in Africa. So these power plays are extremely important for those leaders. We cannot expect from them to build a new pyramid from the ground up. We cannot expect from them to make major changes. They are so focused on keeping what they have and expanding on their power to build a new, more conscious pyramid. That means 1 and 2 together means that we have to do it ourselves. We have to build a new society, a new pyramid from the ground up. And that means that we have to take positive action ourselves. And we have to do it now. If we wait until a situation like Greece or a situation like Argentina in 2002, then we only get negative action. That people go on the street, they plunder banks and they rob factories and shops. And that's negative action, and that's not what I envision. On the contrary, I would never do that. So we should go from a capitalist society to a transparent society. And I will explain the triangle on the right in a minute, but the way to get there I've called transparism. Transparism is a method to transgress capitalism and to create a new society with, as belief system, transparism. The idea of this new pyramid is that if the world economy collapses, that community has grown so big and so fast into a small society, that society can continue. I believe that is possible. I believe with the principles and with the tools that I'm giving you, we can make a good start. If you think that it is possible that the world economy collapses, then think back to 2008, the financial crisis. And there were several days in that period that the world economy was about to collapse. And they called it the end of capitalism, but it would also have been the end of a lot of peaceful lives. In fact, a lot of marriages broke because of the crisis, and a lot of people came into financial problems. So it was a huge crisis, but the world economy continued at the expense of taxpayers. And something like that can happen again because changes that were needed to prevent that were not implemented. So we are worse off than in 2008. So we have to build a transparent society. The transparent society leads to more transparency on top and stability on the bottom. Now, how does such a future society look like? Here you see that government has more influence than business and consumers. So government is really in the lead again, not businesses. And businesses no longer have more influence than consumer organizations. Their influence is the same. The idea of transparism is that we connect existing conscious communities, that we connect existing conscious businesses, and that these communities and businesses can use conscious principles. These principles come on an easy app. In the future, it will also offer the possibility to vote on the principles and to vote on major changes to questions. The idea is that we already start creating a social Holland. A social Holland is this. All these people, these conscious leaders, and all these communities, they work together as a flock of birds. And you see, in these birds, there's nobody a real leader. We are all leading, we are all listening to each other, we are all looking at each other, and at some point we all decide together to find trees, to rest and to start up again, to fly again. It's very interesting, but this is where we should go. The little pyramid that we have to create should be DNA of the future transparent society. So it's very important how we organize ourselves now. We should organize ourselves with principles, with organizational structure, and with democratic tools that are useful for the future society as well. So this is how I think we could start. All the conscious communities that are present could be grouped by a mailing list or by a Facebook group in the right bottom corner. They will form the future consumer organizations. In the left bottom, we have all these conscious businesses. These businesses work together when that's appropriate, when that's useful, do that. At least they will know each other. They connect when necessary. From these communities and from these businesses, we should lead this larger community by discussing principles, by discussing how we cooperate, by seeing benefits, by pointing to opportunities, etc. In my opinion, these leaders should be unpaid and they should be altruistic. So, and that's a big difference with politicians in the capitalist system, where there are career politicians that very often have the same interest in making money as in doing good for their constituency. Altruistic leadership is one of the principles of businesses and of the community. So we should start with what our principles tell us. And in Switzerland, most of the politicians are unpaid. And this is something that I copied from Switzerland. It's a very good idea not to pay them. That means that these politicians should have a job to make money, and they should not make money from doing politics. So what I would add to this community are the conscious principles. And we can discuss and change these principles using direct democracy. And maybe after a couple of years, when we are happy with them, we could also derive from these principles a conscious constitution. And these are a more longer, stable, new ideas on how we as people and business work together, live together, and be social together. Now let's have a look at these principles. Probably you've heard of Neil Donald Walsh. He's a spiritual author. He wrote at least 9 Conversations with God books, and he wrote 11 other books related to those 9 primary books. He concentrated on the change we need to make as people, and he was right. We need to make changes as people. We should become more conscious, we should become more spiritual, we should be less dogmatic towards our religions, etc. And he was right. And many of those principles I copied and I called them personal principles. Then a couple of years later, so that's about 2007, it became clear that these principles work very well in individual life, but didn't have a lot of influence on business. Businesses continued to work as traditional businesses. So the changes that were made personally were not implemented as fast as by businesses. So John Thomas, an Intel employee, thought, well, we need to have principles specifically for businesses. Otherwise, we just become conscious leaders, but without knowing, we copy the principles from capitalism in our business, or we continue to use them. So we need conscious business principles. And he was right. That was step 2. Step 3 came from Barbara Marx Herbert. She was the one making the comparison between the transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly, and so from capitalism to transferism. And she came up with the idea to have a conscious community. And she's right. Only conscious businesses will not do the trick. Politicians will continue to do it their way with the support of businesses, and will continue to fight wars if that is profitable to them. A conscious community will not prevent that, but a conscious community will form an alternative for those who are interested, for those who see the benefit, and for those who are willing to work on it. So here are the 3 implementation steps of that conscious community and later on the conscious society. We should start implementing the personal principles that Neil Donald Walsh brought into this world. And then we should implement the business principles. Why can't we implement the business principles first? Well, think of it in this way. Imagine that you ask Donald Trump to turn his traditional businesses or his politics into conscious business or conscious politics. You probably feel that it doesn't work right now for Donald, right? He should learn first the difference between traditional leadership and conscious leadership and see the benefits of conscious leadership. And only then he can work on his businesses. And then step 3, we should implement community principles. So the principles that form the community, that organize the community, and that bring democracy in there. There are about 50 principles in 3 groups. personal, business, and community principles. First group, the personal principles, have 3 levels: maximizing personal creativity, maximizing personality, and maximizing spirituality. With creativity, I mean the opposite of what we see, for example, with people in North Korea. They are not expected to be creative. Maximizing personality, that is to get as much out of your life as possible. So not only training people to become good employees, but educating people to get as much out of their personality. And that can be sports, it can be politics, it can be hobbies, and it can be 3 types of different work if they're interested in that. And spirituality, I don't mean dogmatic religion here. I mean spirituality in the sense feeling what is right for you, meditating, doing best for yourself and for others. So these are the 3 personal levels. Now we'll get to the 3 business levels: maximizing efficiency, freedom, and justice. Efficiency is needed because at this moment we only produce for 1/3 of the world population. And 2/3 doesn't have enough to educate themselves, to have a good retirement, to sometimes not even enough food. I believe 2 billion people not even have sufficient fresh water, let alone have good toilets, etc. So in order to provide food and shelter and fresh water to them, we have to maximize efficiency in our business processes, because we are, at this moment, we are ruining our planet. And when we continue to do that and try at the same time feed 2/3 of the people extra, then of course that is impossible. Maximizing freedom means that people should be allowed to move from one country to the other. People should be allowed to express themselves exactly as they want, with respect to the freedom of orders, of course. Especially it is limited to those who have money. Freedom of the press is limited to those who own one. Then the last business principle is maximizing justice. And this is reducing all discrimination. And in this respect, you must think of owning money as a discrimination in comparison to people who don't own money. And the reason is that money is ownership currency in the world. All the currencies are ownership currencies. That means that the one who owns it gets more of it automatically, and it's called interest. Then we go to the last level, maximizing transferism. This is the development and the maintenance of a conscious community, or a transparent community. Now, for all of these 3 groups, personal, business, and community level, I have a couple of examples of the principles. The most important personal principles are: we are all one, and there is enough. We are all one is the opposite of we are all separate, and that is the current belief for most people. We are separate from each other, and since we are separate, there is probably not enough for me, so we have to fight to get enough. But if you believe that there is only one, we are all one family, there's only one thing, then one thing cannot be insufficient towards itself. So if you believe in oneness, you can easily believe in enoughness. Separateness and insufficiency are just belief principles. They are widely spread on this planet, but they're just belief principles. You could just as well believe in oneness and enoughness. By the way, these are screenshots of the app that I talked about. And the app shows you a statement, and if you understand the choice of emotions correctly, you will be able to answer the statement correctly as well. For example, you often get irritated by the behavior of other people. At some point, you learn to choose your emotions, and then the answer to this statement is disagree. Think of going to the dentist. The dentist hurts you, but you're not hitting him. That's the difference between feelings and emotions. So when it is in the interest of growing creativity, growing personality, then choose your emotions. Second example, zero needs. And this is one of the principles in the series related to personal relationships. So if you think that your partner needs to make you happy, then you have a need for that partner. So you need your partner to be happy. And that makes you dependent. And dependency is not good for a relationship. So the answer to this statement is also disagree. The principle, inspiration. Employees get inspired by a salary raise. The answer to this statement is also disagree, because employees don't get inspired by the salary raise, they get motivated by the salary raise. And motivation is a good principle. That is something that we can copy from capitalism, but we need to add inspiration. And that is that flame inside you becomes a fire in your organization. All the employees and all the partners and suppliers and customers, management, they all should go for the same objective, the higher objective. When you have inspired your employees, they are much more engaged in your business than they are now. The last example, my salary will always be too low. Well, I just discussed the principle enoughness, and if you understand the principle, you will know that the answer to this question is also disagree. If you disagree with a statement, you can write a comment, and you get feedback with a message here. Now let's go to the business principles. The main business principle is explained in this example on the left. In the traditional business, all stakeholders, and these are suppliers, customers, the environment, government, employees, they are all working for the shareholders to maximize profit. Maximizing profit is the objective of a traditional business. And this is called shareholder orientation. We are all working for the shareholders to maximize the profit. And that's the main difference with a conscious business. In a conscious business, all stakeholders are treated equally. Now you might think that if, for example, employees are paid a good salary because they are treated equally in comparison to the shareholders, then shareholders will probably lose profit. Well, it's the exact opposite. It is proven that conscious businesses are more profitable than traditional businesses. So stakeholder orientation has the advantage that, for example, environment is treated better, communities are treated better by the business, but it also has a benefit for the shareholders. They make more money as well. And a couple of other examples, high moral standards. Well, for example, Volkswagen and their diesel scandal, they knew that diesel is environment unfriendly and people living near streets with a lot of cars die sooner than people far away from cities. And despite that, they consciously put software in their cars just to sell more. Apparently, there was a lack of moral standards there. In a conscious business, this should not happen, because the conscious business should have moral standards independent from their stakeholders. Flourishing is a term to indicate that a business should clean up the planet as part of their business process. So they should no longer delay polluting the planet or reduce polluting the planet. No, they should make profit from cleaning up the planet. And it's just a matter of focus. For example, making money off your waste, you will find ways to do that. And that's one of the reasons why conscious businesses are more profitable. A couple of other examples. Maximum income, the best board member should receive the highest bonus. The answer here is disagree, because in a conscious business, it makes sense that all board members earn the same. The explanation for all these principles, it can be found in the app. After answering the question, you can swipe back to get explanations. Tax-friendly, because of the time, I will skip a couple of those principles. We can read them at your ease in the app. Let's go to the community principles. Very important is that the community has a feminine culture. And a feminine culture is the opposite of a masculine culture. A feminine culture, and you see it here on the left, the features are eye for the weak, care for others, room for self-reflection, and sharing of resources. Of course, you will understand that this is all needed now. And the only countries in the world that have these cultures already in their countries are Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Holland, and Finland. So we just need to copy their culture. And if you want to know what the difference is between the culture of these countries and the country of your country, just download the free app Culture GPS and you can look it up yourself. The second example of a community principle is inclusiveness. Since we consider others as one, principle oneness, it means that we no longer compete with other businesses. We cooperate and we specialize. And of course, we only do that with businesses that have the same conscious understanding. We would not cooperate with a traditional business that would benefit at the expense of the conscious business from such a cooperation. I skipped the explanation why some businesses act as psychopaths, but there is a very good documentary on YouTube which is called D Corporation, and I advise you to watch it, especially the first 40 minutes. The characteristics of a psychopath are compared to the characteristics of some businesses. We have to protect ourselves from those psychopaths. Now let's go to the tools. The tool that I already mentioned is the app Transparent Mind. And this is an app to learn about these principles. You can download it for free. And it's a kind of game, as you already know, and it gives all the information of the principles with each question. It has a fast and a best mode. The fast mode means that you go as fast as possible from level 1 to level 7. And best mode is that you try to answer all the principles to make as many points. Once you've registered, you have the possibility to give feedback on the questions. Some questions are not yet formulated correctly. That has to be improved. And if you disagree with a principle or with a question, you can give that feedback. And for other than that, nothing is done with your registration. Of course, we are GDPR friendly. The idea is that those who understand the principles can be certified. And certification will be one of the tools that I envision to implement. But first we need to have a community to get feedback, because the principles that I've put in that app are the first version. And I'd like to have your feedback to improve them. Once we have a group of people working on these principles and willing to implement them in their own communities, we can expand the app with voting. And voting is needed to add questions, add principles, change principles, and to introduce direct democracy. Most countries in the world have indirect democracy. It means that we vote for politicians and they determine their own work package. Switzerland is the only country that has direct democracy. Here in Switzerland, we vote for politicians, but we also vote for their work package and the budget that they have. So, of course, we need direct democracy in our community. So the idea of this app is to introduce direct democracy. But of course, the first step is to get a group of people willing to work on these principles. Another tool is called the CBC program. And this CBC program is for businesses that need help to bring their level of consciousness to a higher level. It's a program to design a roadmap to show what goes well and to focus on what is missing. And this program is based on the integral theory by Ken Wilber and on the book Reinventing Organization by Frédéric Laloux. The advantage of implementing such a roadmap is that these businesses have become more resilient in times of crisis. As I already mentioned, the profitability goes up, their employee productivity goes up, as absenteeism goes down, sickness goes down, revenue goes up, and the involvement of community goes up as well. These don't have to be all true at the same time, but these is the result of scientific studies in 2007, 2013. This is not something I've made up. This is what happens when you turn a traditional business into a conscious business. This is the end of my presentation. So what I'm offering to you is principles and an app, and I ask you to become member of a mailing list, and that mailing list should grow into a discussion group or a Facebook group, and that should grow into a community. And it's all for free. Now your question is maybe, why is this for free? What's the catch? Is there a catch? Well, I hope there is no catch, and if there is a catch, please let me know, but I'm just using my own principles. And here I have listed the principles that I have used in order to bring this to you for free. First of all, the principle of enoughness. I've paid this out of my own pocket and I can give it away. And also it's the feeling of oneness with humanity, oneness with other people like you. And the idea there is what I do for another, I do for myself. In one way or another, it will come back to me. The third principle I'm using is superconscious creation. This is just my contribution to the community, but I really, really need your feedback and I really need your cooperation to build this community. And this is a we thing, not a me thing. The fourth principle I'm using is non-materialism. Although I like to drive a car and vacuum cleaner is beneficial, I try to be non-materialistic. So helping others gives me more happiness than buying a new TV set. I hope you understand that. So this is just a way of making myself happy. Principle awareness is also relevant because I believe we need to take action now. The situation in the world is not very good. Capitalism is going to more and more extremes, and there's a big risk that we get another crisis like in 2008. So we need to take action now. And if we would start with a payment model or business model, then I don't know whether we can go as fast as we need to go. The first business principle that I'm using is altruistic leadership. I'm doing this as an altruistic leader, but I don't ask you to follow me. I don't ask you to listen to me. I'm just telling you, I'll go first and check me, control me, criticize me. I'll just try to be an example. And if you want to listen to me, but foremost, listen to yourself. Let's do this together. Let's create a social whole. Then the three community principles that I've used. Uncreative, creative expression. I believe that it's in the interest of maximizing efficiency that only production work is paid and political work or creative work like painting or like playing football is not paid. Another part of that is unpaid leadership. Although I'm not a leader that needs to be followed, I really would like to be part of leadership, but unpaid. Stewardship means that I don't try to own this. This is my contribution to the community. Another part is that I don't think money should be owned. Ownership of money is called interest, and I don't want to benefit from that in any way. If I would see all this money that I have spent as an investment, I would be very frustrated right now because I've spent a lot of money and nothing has come back yet. So I was, oh, how do I get my money back? That's why I see it as spending. I see it as a gift. And then it makes me happy. It's the same money, it's the same spending, but I don't have the problem of getting it back. As long as I can do this, I'm happy. Then community currency unit. Yes, the community, when it grows into society, it should have its own regional currency. That currency is, as I already mentioned, ownerless and therefore interestless. And that means that we should not see this as investments, but only as expenses. So I don't think there's a catch. As long as I can make my money in the IT world or with consulting or with creating roadmaps for businesses, I'm fine. I don't have a very expensive life and I'm happy as it is. And I really, really would like to build this conscious community with you.